in those self-check questions. Make sure you turn in those self-check questions, those were for homework yesterday, 1 through 6. Your names on it. And then respond to this question, your bell work. What was the purpose of those cave paintings? Think about those Cro-Magnon people. Why would they do that? Why would they spend their time doing paintings?
Please stand for the pledge. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Your books are on sale for $40. They'll be passed out May the 1st. Seniors, it's time to pay your $40 senior fee. This covers your cap and gown, your graduation picture, your diploma cover, and several things that you used to pay for separately. That has to be paid or you cannot participate in graduation. Prom tickets are still on sale. Prom goers will be makeup done, taken care of. Lions Club and ASEP scholarships can be given in today, Mr. Kessler. UTM is sponsoring the Pike Fights this Friday night to raise money for St. Jude's. any student who wants to attend next week. Play practices this week. Tomorrow will be the classroom scenes. Thursday will be Gilder's and Ichabod. The baseball games today, or yesterday, of course, was canceled. There will be a doubleheader, and it's going to be played at Carlisle County. And it's my understanding that the softball is going to be the same thing, play a doubleheader at Carlisle County today. I want to congratulate 4 more students who are not just college ready, we also, what I would say CCR, which really, when they make their ACT benchmarks, it's college ready. Now, they are also career ready. Susanna Watzel passed her COSA industry certification in computer programming. Dania Vinson and Tiffany Aiden passed theirs in business management, and Autumn Tucker passed hers in administrative support. So those 4 are now officially college and career ready. And we're proud of them and hope you'll congratulate them. And we're all going to keep pushing Keon so that he gets that one last benchmark. So with these both, he's got his career ready. We want him to get college ready also. Let's have a good day.
All right, so our bell work question was, what was the purpose of the Cro-Magnon cave paintings? Who's got an answer for me?
To communicate and to just to communicate.
Okay, very good. She said to communicate. Can anybody add to that? Maybe to communicate what? What were they trying to do? Okay?
Show how they hunt,
Okay, and the main thing was they're hunting. And why do you say that?
so that all knew how.
Okay, that way their children knew how to hunt. What were most of the cave paintings of? Who remembers? Ashanti?
Google is
Right, spears, which also led us to believe that they used what? What would we call a stick or a spear? Basics.
A stick with a twerk.
Yes, but what do we call those? They're able to use,
arrow.
maybe some sort of arrow, use tools more basically. Remember we talked about the Neanderthals, started using tools. That handyman, Opus habilis, he began with using tools. And these guys kind of carried that on. Any questions on that? Okay. Again, some of our housekeeping, we will have a test Friday over this evidence of common ancestry unit. Okay. I plan that Thursday we'll do a review day, probably Kahoot day. If you have a tablet or iPhone, make sure you bring those Thursday. Okay. Maybe we can play independently. If not, we'll do in pairs again if we need to. Also, be checking Infinite Campus for missing assignments. Like I said yesterday, let's finish out the year strong. Make sure if you've got missing work that you come see me and get it made up, lunch break or after school. And then also that extra credit assignment I passed out yesterday, that is due Friday, 25 points. Okay, that thumbless challenge. Has anybody done it yet?
No.
Has anybody?
I've done it before.
Oh, you have? Okay. Well, I told some of the other 8th graders who were talking about it, maybe y'all all get together and do like a basketball game or something like that, just for fun, scrimmage game without thumbs. That would be pretty neat. Just do something, get together, do something like that. So that'll be on you guys to kind of organize that though. Our objective for today is I can list examples of direct and indirect evidence for evolution. Now we've talked about the different theories surrounding evolution. We've talked about the different types of, or examples of evidence. But today we're going to kind of classify it as direct or indirect. And we're going to talk about what that means in a second. Okay, before we do, does anybody know the difference when I say these words direct and indirect? Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Do something directly.
Face to face.
Straightforward. Okay, yeah, very straightforward, kind of face to face, kind of take it for what it's worth, versus indirect, or something you're doing something indirectly or looking at something indirectly. How might that be different? What'd you say, Kate? You're looking at something, yes. So if it's indirectly.
Not speaking.
Okay, we're not seeing the whole picture maybe. Maybe we're just seeing parts of it. And if we only see parts of it, do you know what we have to do? When scientists, what's that called? Sort of make a hypothesis, maybe make some theories. Okay, when we're taking just one piece and another, we're making inferences. Okay, so we're going to put the difference real quick. Direct evidence are facts that establish the conclusion without the need for drawing inferences. So it's very point blank, right? What you see is what you get, sort of thing, when it comes to direct evidence. So if we're looking at that picture there, that little crime scene, what is the direct evidence that they have? Okay, there's a blood stain. What else do they see? There's a door open. Would it be direct evidence if I said somebody broke in through the door, or would it be indirect? Why would it be indirect? We don't really know. Maybe he left the door open. Maybe he left it unlocked. Maybe he invited somebody in. Maybe somebody broke through. Okay? So that's taking you to the next step, that what if, or kind of putting the pieces together, making the inferences. That's what it's called, indirect evidence. Indirect evidence is those conclusions made through inferences based upon the evidence you're given. So they're made through inferences. Kind of an example, scientifically speaking, is we don't have direct evidence that the sun produces energy through nuclear fission. That's what scientists believe, but why don't we know for sure? Right. Exactly, Kyrie. It's too hot to go there. We don't know for sure. We make inferences based on the evidence we can collect, based on the facts we do have. All right, so the same thing happens when scientists discuss the theory of evolution. Okay? We have direct evidence. Remember we talked about that antibiotic resistance? Back, I don't know, that was a good month ago. Okay? Those bacteria have evolved in the last 100 years to be resistant to antibiotics. That is direct evidence. That is something that scientists have measured. We know for sure. We have studied this. Okay, we've seen it with our own eyes. Whereas indirect evidence for evolution might be things like looking at fossils and making inferences from those. Okay, we're looking at embryology, kind of connecting the dots. I'll give you a second to get these two definitions written down, because they're going to help you doing that I can statement today. That I can give examples of direct and indirect evidence for evolution. Raise your hand if you need more time. 30 seconds. Okay. I guess we kind of answered that, or I said this already. In terms of evolution, do you think a majority of our evidence is direct or indirect? Indirect. Why do you say indirect?
We can't go back that far.
Right. We can't go back that far. We're not able to go back and look for sure and see how things changed. Okay? But again, we look at indirect pieces of evidence like fossils and embryology and homologous structures and vestigial structures. Okay? and we make inferences from those. Okay, we look at the similarities and we see maybe how things have developed. Okay, so what we're going to do today is we're going to do what's called a spider map. I think this is kind of a neat way for us to be able to organize this information we've talked about the last few weeks. Okay, I would recommend you have out your guided notes worksheets. There are 3 of them. Okay, those will be helpful today. All right, we're going to make a spider map of the evidence for evolution. Okay, on it you've got 3 branches. The first branch is principles of natural selection. The second branch is direct evolution, and the third is direct evidence, and the third is indirect evidence. Okay? I'm going to put up a spider map on the next slide in a second. It has some of these blanks filled in for us, and then it leaves some for you to find on your own. Okay, before we do that, I want to go over the instructions. You're going to copy and paste information from the next slide onto your spider map, and then fill in the examples of indirect evidence for evolution. I'm going to leave it up to you to kind of fill in those blanks. What are those pieces of evidence that scientists had to kind of piece together and make inferences from? All right. For each point on the spider map, for every point, whether I've given it to you or whether you have to find it yourself using your notes, I want you to include some sort of short definition or explanation and a drawing, okay, for each point. And then lastly, make sure it's neat and it's colorful. We'll pass out the shower caddies in a second. Okay. So again, you're going to make sure each blank has some sort of piece of evidence for evolution, whether it's direct or indirect. Then you're going to add descriptions and drawings of each. So I'm going to put up the spider map. The next slide. Fill in those blanks. Okay. So if we're looking at the top part, principles of natural selection. On that top bar, we have overpopulation. Because remember, we talked about Darwin. One of the things he said is there has to be more than enough or an overabundance of that species produced in order for natural selection to occur. Okay. So for overpopulation, you'll need to, in a minute, give some sort of short description and a drawing. Then we've got variations. What do we call those variations that are helpful? Who remembers? An adaptation. Very good, Hannah. An adaptation. Okay. And then competition. Your third example for the principles of natural selection. Then we have direct evidence. Again, that antibiotic resistance. Remember we watched the video with the amoeba sisters a while ago? Okay, and I talked about how that bacteria over time, through variations and adaptations, had become resistant to antibiotics. That is direct evidence. We also have something we didn't talk too much about, which I'm going to leave the dictionaries available for you to do a little bit of research on. That pesticide resistance. Does anybody know what I'm talking about when I say pesticide resistance?
Gets rid of bugs.
Okay, pesticides get rid of bugs. They help to protect the plants. So if a bug is resistant to the pesticide, what's that mean? It's resisting against the pesticide.
Fight.
Okay, it's kind of fighting against it, so that pesticide is no longer working. Okay, so think about farmers and their crops. If we have some sort of pesticide resistance in the bugs or in maybe the different diseases that the plants get, it's going to be harder to keep those plants alive and healthy. Okay? And then that last one there is genetic changes in plants. Remember we watched that video on how we genetically modified tomatoes to have a longer shelf life and to taste better, and they'll grow quicker, grow with less water, be larger. Okay, that's what we're talking about there. And then for indirect evidence, it's going to be up to you to look in your notes to find 4 examples of indirect evidence. Okay? Are there any questions on that? So look back in your notes. What are some pieces of evidence, I've already named 1 or 2, that scientists kind of have to draw inferences from to prove their theory of evolution? I don't know for sure. That's gonna be your challenge for the rest of today. Today will be an independent workday. If we're not talking to our neighbors, I will leave up the instructions. Come around and help if need be. Can I get somebody to pass out the shower caddies, please? Kate and Keelan, put 2 on each desk, please, for each group. Yeah, 2 on each group. So look back. What are those indirect pieces of evidence for evolution? And then you can start doing your descriptions and your drawings.
Yeah, because it was really there when the fossil fell and everything. So we just kind of put pieces together. You could? You could do that. You could.
The guided note sheet called Evidence for Evolution, probably going to be your most helpful. Your stuff. There were some examples of evidence we talked about yesterday, for sure. We talked about primates, but an Evidence for Evolution guided note sheet is going to have the most examples. if you're getting stumped on the last one or two, I just want you to think about, you could be as specific with this or as broad with this as you prefer, okay? As we think about hobo habilis, we talked about him yesterday. He was found with tools, so what did scientists infer? That he what?
Me.
Okay, he was a man. What did he do with those tools probably?
Use them to find out.
Maybe he used them to find, okay. What would a caveman need a tool for? To find food. Maybe he used it to grind up his food. That is a piece of evidence that we don't know for sure what he used it for. Maybe he used it to comb his hair. We don't know. Okay? We're making inferences based on what we found. So it could be as simple as finding tools next to Homo habilis. That's an example of indirect evidence. Or it could be specific, like saying they found imprint fossils or they found frozen fossils. You could put just fossils as a generic overarching thing. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Or you could be specific and talk about the different structures, right? We have homologous or vestigial. Okay. So again, you can be as broad with it or as specific with it as you would like. And you can talk about the cave paintings as one piece of evidence for evolution. It's showing, again, that they have, at this point, found enough food that they can spend their time doing paintings, right? Doing things that other people groups might have found a little less important. And again, once you have those 4 labels, start going back through for each point, give a description and a drawing. Make it neat and colorful. This will hopefully be really helpful when it comes to studying for this week's exam. I had a question, can we use the back as well? If maybe run out of room, that is more than okay. Tool actually, if you write the definition on the back and practice flipping it over in Word. Competition probably would be variation. The rest should be in your notes though. Again, you can also use the dictionaries. Or if you're looking for what is a pesticide, or what is something that has a resistance to something, use the dictionaries.
you remember what it is, that's perfect.
For each of those, right? We've got 15 more minutes to work on this in class. Make sure you're staying focused.